This video is now in session. Today I want to talk about Texas and why Democrats should be capitalizing on Texas in 2024 and in future elections to come. So in the 2020 election, Joe Biden lost Texas to Donald Trump by 4.5 percentage points. And if we look at the political trends, this has been a decrease for Republicans ever since 2000. Bush won Texas by 21.3 percentage points, so that's a safe margin for Texas. And from there, it's been going down and down. If we keep going, it's turned into lean, but then back safe, but then back lean, and now it's lean again. And we can just look at we can just compare past elections to past elections. So let's refresh this page and compare right here. If you see, this is comparing the 2000 election to the 2020 election. And here we see that Democrats improved on their margins by 15.8% in Texas. That's only a few other states have done better than that. And then if we keep going, it keeps turning more, or it keeps staying in a shift towards Democrats. So Texas is shifting towards Democrats. Why is that important? Well, Texas is gaining in electoral votes, and it has been for several decades now. If you don't know how the electoral system works, I'll just give a quick explanation. The electoral system is a special system in the United States where each state is assigned a certain amount of votes to have for voting for president. Whoever gets the majority in that state gets all of those votes. And the electoral votes are decided by the amount of House of Representatives seats in that state plus the 2 senators that are in that state. So Texas right now has 38, so that would mean it has 36 representatives and 2 senators. So those would combine to make 38. But this has been increasing for a very long time. If we go to past elections here, and then we start from 1976, Texas had 26 electoral votes, and as you look at Texas, it keeps rising and rising and rising. So 2024 is expected to have 41 electoral votes. So that's very important for Democrats, because let's just apply the 2016 election map onto the 2024 election map. So Hillary lost this election, 232 electoral votes to 306 for Republicans. North Carolina should be Republican. So here Democrats have 229. Now watch as I give Texas to Democrats. Democrats then have 270 electoral votes, exactly the amount they need to win in an election. So if Hillary Clinton won Texas, then that would have been game over for Trump. We would have seen 4 years of Hillary Clinton instead of Donald Trump. So that's what Texas does. It's a very big state, very populated, and because it's shifting for the Democrats, then Democrats should be focusing on that. And another reason why they should be focusing on Texas is because they're starting to run out of opportunities in the Rust Belt. They were able to get back on the 3 Rust Belt states, 3 of the 5 that I consider to be Rust Belt states. Iowa and Ohio are included. And then they were able to get Arizona and Georgia, but in the future, I really don't think that Democrats focusing on the Rust Belt would be a good idea, because long term it's just not sustainable. The Rust Belt has been losing electoral votes decade after decade. If we go to 1976, Michigan used to have 21 electoral votes, Pennsylvania 27, New York had 41. Could you believe that? Now it has like 29, and it's expected to lose 1 or 2 electoral votes in the 2020 to 2030 electoral map. So all of these states in the Northeast and in the Rust Belt are starting to decrease in the amount of electoral votes because their population is not growing as fast as the Sun Belt, including Texas. So as you can see, let's just focus on Pennsylvania, the most populous state out of these 4 Rust Belt states. So Pennsylvania used to have a bigger population than Illinois. And then we see here 25 for Pennsylvania, 24, then 23, 22, 21 for Pennsylvania, 20, and next year it's going to be 19 electoral votes. So again, it's not good. It's not sustainable for Democrats to keep up with this because they're just losing electoral votes here. And 306 electoral votes was the amount Joe Biden won in the 2020 election, and that's not enough. Or that is technically enough, but it's it's not going to be enough when these states keep losing electoral votes. And these states are getting more and more competitive. If we look at the shifts over time in past presidential elections, then you can see that the Rust Belt has become more Republican. Let's compare to 1996. Let's go there. So you can see all of these states have become more Republican. Republicans were able to lower the margins in these states, and if you keep going, 2008, all of these Rust Belt states have shifted Republican since 2008. Since 2012, all of them except for Illinois has shifted. If you look at 2016, it's an off year mainly because of how big 2020 was a repudiation of Trump, but it still shows that Republicans are doing better and better in the Rust Belt. And eventually, I do see a situation within 2 presidential cycles where all 3 of these states go back to Republicans, but by lean margins instead of tilt margins. All 3 of them were tilt margins in 2016, but in 2028, I could see them all going to Republicans by lean margin, and I can see Minnesota going to Republicans by tilt margin. So that completely erases Democrats' progress in Georgia and Arizona. They would need North Carolina, and even then, it wouldn't be enough. So that's why they need Texas. Texas is the future of the Democratic Party. If the Democrats want to portray themselves as a diverse party with a variety of voices of different backgrounds, then they should be focusing on the Sun Belt, because the Rust Belt is becoming wider and wider. So that's what Democrats need to do, and now is the time to do it, because if we look at the migration patterns, a lot of the people moving into Texas are coming from 3 specific regions. First, California. A lot of tech companies and a lot of people, a lot of tech employees have moved to Austin and the other big cities of Texas because of less strict tax laws, regulation laws, and less taxes in Texas. Now, obviously, this is just a very inept move if they're trying to do that, because eventually Texas will vote Democratic and taxes will rise for some people and regulations will increase, but nonetheless, that's just how the migration patterns are. So a lot of California workers are moving to Texas, and as a result are making Texas more democratic. And then you have 2 other places. You have the city centers of the Rust Belt states that are moving to Houston or Dallas. A lot of these are Black Americans who are moving away from the Rust Belt, which is why I said that the Rust Belt is becoming wider. And finally, the Northeast, the New York City metropolitan area, Washington, Philadelphia, all of these 3 cities, and you can also include Boston. A lot of these college-educated workers are moving over to Texas to find tech jobs, to find growing tech jobs. So all 3 of those key voter demographics are leaning more for Democrats instead of Republicans. So that's what is shifting Texas more for Democrats. And if Democrats want to say that they care about Texas and they care about their constituents, then they should be targeting Texas. Now, this only really applies for the next 10 years, presidentially speaking, and speaking in terms of gubernatorial election. If we talk about House of Representatives election in Texas, there are a few seats that could be competitive, but in the between 2020 and 2030, Democrats unfortunately are not going to be able to do, or fortunately for Republicans, are not going to be able to do much for the Texas House of Representatives, mainly because in 2020, Democrats did not do well in the Texas State House elections, and the definition of doing well for Democrats in Texas in 2020 is where Democrats are able to gain the majority in the Texas House of Representatives, and that's not what they did. They gained, as of now, a total of 0 seats. And if we talk about the Texas Senate, they only gained 1 seat. So there's still a Republican majority in the Texas legislatures. And that's important because the state legislature in every single decade whoever controls the state legislatures in 2020 or in any the new decade, will then be the ones that redraw the U.S. House of Representatives map for the 2020 redistricting cycle. So as I've mentioned earlier, Texas has been growing in electoral votes, and that's because they've been taking some from the Rust Belt. So they took 3, so now they added 3 congressional districts. And as a result, the maps have to be redrawn. So if we see here, this is what the if this loads, this is what the Texas House of Representatives maps look like right now. But it's going to change because Texas will gain 3 congressional districts, while Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Minnesota lose 1, so that Texas can gain 3. Now because Texas's redistricting rules delegates the responsibilities to the state legislatures, and the state legislatures are controlled by Republicans, that gives Republicans the power to gerrymander in Texas, and that's going to be very important for them politically because Texas is becoming a swing state. So as you can see here, it's already been very gerrymandered. So Texas is the 35th district, combines the central core of San Antonio plus the suburbs of Austin, which are heavily there are a lot of Latino Americans in, and then combines it to pack Democrats. Here you can see Austin, a Democratic city. It is cracked by several different congressional districts. Texas's 21st district takes the southern half of Austin, and then you can see Texas's 10th, and this applies to others like the 31st and the 17th. And the 25th. So all of these take Austin's vote, and what they do is they crack the Democratic vote, and this is because in 2010, Republicans had the majority in the state legislatures and also had the gubernatorial mansion. So the same thing is occurring in 2020, and as a result, Democrats have had a missed opportunity there. But for the presidential race, it'll still be important for them because if they are able to have Texas, then that means that they no longer have to concentrate as much on the Rust Belt. They don't have to devote as much resources, which is good for them because eventually the cost to benefit ratio for Democrats will be way too little in the Rust Belt. So that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. This video is now adjourned, and I'll see you in the next one.